Hi, Jeff.
Hey, Amanda, how are you?
Good. How are you?
I am good. It's time for another office hours, right?
I
So we must
know.
be Tuesday at 9 a.m. Pacific.
Tuesday at 9 a.m. Hello. Good morning, or good noon, or whatever time it is for all of you guys.
Yeah.
There.
We didn't get a chance to talk about this last week. We ended up having to cancel office hours. I had a terrible migraine and spent the day doing things I don't want to describe here on the air. But I will tell everybody that I got the opportunity to sit with Amanda last week, and we sat and had a bunch of meetings with our team and kind of left invigorated and excited and lots of things to come. But today it's office hours.
It was really good seeing you in person. Neither of us were at our home office, but now we are at our home office.
Yes.
Yeah, Jeff just had a temporary. It was a migraine situation, so we were sad to miss you last week, but we're glad.
Never good. But we do have some announcements. We could probably start there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, let's start there. Let me start today by talking about today's guests and why they're here. Because we actually had a live tech talk last week on widgets, and our guests, Kai Lurch and Karthik Raghupathi, are on the show today. They gave the talk last week, and they had a lot of follow-up questions, so they're going to be here live talking about it. And I'm going to actually post a link to that in the chat. So if you didn't get a chance to watch the live tech talk, now you can view it on demand on our YouTube channel. And you can see all the goodness that was asked there. And then we're just going to follow. We're just going to keep on going from there.
Yeah, I have lots of questions for these guys, not only about widgets and how you build them and the right approaches, which I definitely want to have all of your questions as we get into all of this. But I also want to know what it was like to do a live tech talk. All of our tech talks prior to the one last week have all been pre-recorded. We send them off to a video studio and they do some polishing and tweaking. But these guys just got on air and decided to talk for a half an hour about widgets. And I want to know how that experience was too. So one of the other stories that I really like to share is when you hear about businesses that are growing and thriving on Alexa. And so healing.fm, we just released a blog post about what they're doing. And I think we're going to drop the link to that here in the chat. It's a very cool story about some of the things that they're doing with Alexa. And so make sure to check that one out.
Yeah, and we also have another really cool blog post to share about the CookPad widget. We're talking about widgets today, and we wanted to talk to a business owner. It's the CTO of CookPad about his experience adding a widget to the CookPad skill and how that's worked out for the CookPad business and what that's like, the whole widget process. And we'll link that blog post in the chat if you want to check that out. I think the widgets are going to open up a lot of discoverability avenues for developers. And I know that you have like questions and you want to dig deeper on some of that. So.
For sure. It's very timely too, right? As we talk about widgets, the fact that they have one and are out talking about it is fantastic. And then finally, if you're like me, and we talked about CookPad, I do love myself some eating. And so if you haven't checked this out, Uber Eats now actually has hand-free ordering with Alexa. So you can inform what your delivery status is. You don't have to be glued to your phone. I know when I order food from a delivery app, I'm constantly checking to see where the car is and how close it is to the house. But now Alexa can do all of that with Uber Eats. So there's a blog post about that as well. And check it out. I think you'll be pretty surprised how easy it is to handle a lot of that.
It looks like we actually have CookPad in the chat today. Hello, Tapster. Welcome to the stream. Thank you for tuning in. We're happy to have you and excited to see your widget in action as well. And that last link, I'm going to go ahead and link that Uber Eats announcement too. If you want to see more of that, that's going to be in the chat.
All right. Well, that leads us to our guests, Amanda. I think.
Yep. Let me go ahead and I was just waiting for that to process. Let me go ahead and bring them on screen. So Karthik and Kai, welcome to the show today. Thank you for being here, and thank you for your bravery and doing that live tech talk. How did that go?
Yeah,
you tell me.
Well, it looked good on our end.
Yeah. Likewise.
Terrific.
Yeah. I think a big part of that was because Kai and we've been on the office hours quite a bit of times now, and because we are used to kind of doing a bit of live talk, I guess there was not much issues there. But I kind of sometimes tend to prefer these informal ones where you can just keep on talking about something and just not have to stick to a script. I love those, but yeah.
Yeah, scripted conversations can sometimes be a little bit harder, but this is nice. We get to sit here and just talk and certainly discuss things with our audience, which is always one of the most valuable parts of this entire experience.
Yeah, this isn't your first time on office hours, so we always appreciate having you back, and we always appreciate the candid conversations we can have here with folks.
Yeah.
Good.
You want to
So I guess one of the first questions I have for all of you is that, we've talked about widgets before, and certainly we've gone on at length about APL. When we think about building for widgets, though, are there a few tips? This probably came up in your tech talk as well. Are there a few tips you offer for people about getting started when they want to build their first widget? What do you recommend where they get started, or some of the technology they should look at?
Yeah, I can get started with that. So first things first, there is the technical documentation that we have, and also the design guidelines. As a quick reminder, alexa.design/widgets brings you there. There's a lot of things to read. Then, of course, watch the tech talk from last week. We try to summarize the most relevant and important things you need to know to get started. And then lastly, and also this has been talked about in the design guide, familiarize with the Alexa responsive layouts and components that Amazon provides to developers to get started with an entire layout that you can use for your widget. So basically everything you need to know is to pick up these layouts in APL and feed your content into it, whatever you'd like to show. And this basically already provides you an entire APL document as you can use it as a widget. APL, of course, the Alexa presentation language, is something that you need to know at least to some extent. But like I said, with those provided layouts and components, this should be an easy start, I would say.
Cool.
So
I think those are some
to
good
go.
tips. And as you said, there's the tech talk is chock full of tips and ideas for how to get started and what to build and ways to go forward. So I think that's fantastic.
Yeah. And I forgot to mention the GitHub repository providing code reference to the plant care widget that was developed by Karthik. And also we had a code walkthrough in last week's tech talk. So Karthik went through the code and explained some of its details.
Mm-hmm. And that tech talk is still on the YouTube. So if anybody missed it, they can still watch it on demand and catch up on get all the good code info.
For sure.
And I was going to say, then there's always the APL Slack channel in this Slack community where we, Kai and I, we both hang out quite often. So feel free to bring your widget questions in there. And I guess adding to what Kai said about responsive components and templates, we always have so when you go to create a widget in the developer console, there are like around 8 or 9 of them. And they are like a pretty good quick starter kind of thing.
Yeah.
Very cool. There's a comment in the chat that reminds me, there's a couple of things that we should probably talk about. As you mentioned, the widget stuff is now available in the developer console. You have those templates you mentioned. But Malero actually mentioned that the developer console looks a little different today. And I don't know if everybody has noticed that or saw I think there was an announcement about this. But they basically made some changes to how the build model works inside the developer console. And so today, if you're building a skill across multiple languages, you have to go in and individually build each of your models for each of the locales. And if you go in the developer console today, you'll find, in fact, there's just one build button. And it applies across all of your regions, regardless of how many languages or things that you're supporting. And so you can be confident that you're building and moving the things that you need into the appropriate places in the dev console. And so you'll notice some small changes when you're in the dev console. And I anticipate that there will be more to come. There's a lot of little things that they're doing to try to make the developer console a little more friendly, a little easier to use. And I think there will be a more formal announcement about all of these things once all of them are live. But you may start to see some little tweaks and changes along the way as we go. So it's an exciting time.
Yeah. Yesterday I was reading that we are still dialing up on this. So some developers might still see the old interface.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, I think it's supposed to be near 100% close. I think near the end of this week, but it should be soon.
Yeah.
But I have noticed the changes on mine, and as some people mentioned in the chat. So if you don't see it, it's coming very, very soon. But they are, as we do with all feature releases, they slowly but surely release on a percentage basis what percentage of the audience get access to those things. And so It should be hitting your developer console very soon if it's not already there.
That's great.
All right, there was one other question that came in from Emil Tice on LinkedIn. This is not a specific APL question, but maybe you guys have some insights on this. He says, why are existing skills which show a QR code now required to remove those QR codes from their APL screens? Especially if the comment is like, it's now not recommended to use QR codes. As a non-native speaker, I would think it's not forbidden, but my skill got removed. So I assume widgets with QR codes would also have a hard time, right? Is there any insight you can offer? Do you guys have any thoughts on this? I wasn't aware of any changing policy.
It sounds like a certification policy question. Yeah, it's definitely something to take back to our cert team and ask them about.
It's good to know, though. I mean, he's attributing his skill being pulled from the store for using QR codes. I'm not aware of a specific policy in our certification guidelines that would block the use of those. But I know there is some language in there about trying to get users to go to other websites or something like that. And QR codes do fall under that, but I don't think that this is meant to be malicious. This is just an easy way to connect users with other resources. So, all right. Well, thank you for the question, Emil. And we do have some folks behind the scenes on our developer advocacy team, so I'm hoping they will have an opportunity to reach out to you.
Yeah, I'm interested in that as well. So if you can get me to this contact, the skill affected, I would like to look into that.
Perfect. And just as a reminder that Kai and Karthik are both in the APL channel of the Alexa Slack. And so if you're not already there, I showed it on the screen a moment ago. But for you that haven't been in Slack before, or maybe you're here for the first time in a while, you can go to alexa.design/Slack. You can jump right in. There's lots and lots of channels. This is another thing that I have to remind people about frequently. We didn't make all of the channels mandatory. We made a core like 8 or 10 that are required. When you join, you'll automatically have those channels. But in the channel list, there's about 30 channels you can go to, and they cover all sorts of different topics. And APL happens to be one of those. So if APL is your thing, or you want to learn more about widgets, that would be the place to go. So make sure you check out that channel specifically.
So when you gave your tech talk, I know you had a lot of questions you didn't get a chance to answer. And we kind of collected those up. You collected those up. Do you want to go ahead and talk about some of those questions now, and give the answers that you had prepared for the questions you missed last time? Because I know the tech talk was only 30-minute, right? So we had a lot more feedback than we were able to cover in 30 minutes.
Sure,
yeah, absolutely.
And I think I can jump into it. I have questions, and Kai and I'll take some of these up. So the very first question was, I think there was some questions around if audio can be played on a widget, and we had mentioned that video can be played on a widget, and we had mentioned not, and the commenter had asked if video cannot be directly shown by widget, can audio be played? Sky, do you want to take that one up?
Yeah, sure. I think we already mentioned that in the tech talk that widgets are supposed to be silent. In fact, they are silent. So even though if you would try or attempt to play something back through the widget, you should not hear it. Obviously, this is a challenge from a user experience perspective. There are multiple widgets showing simultaneously. Just imagine every one of them starts to sound. So that wouldn't make a good user experience. So yeah, like we said earlier, playing back video is not supported in widgets, as well as playing back audio.
Yeah, that makes sense, because they're designed to be shown on your screen as like a reminder of the skill you could use. So the skill is what'll play the audio if you decide to activate the skill or click on it. But the widget itself is more like a calendar app on my phone, right? I don't want that to play audio every time I open up my calendar. I want that to be silent so that I have that just a reminder of what.
Yeah, what you can do though is that if you touch on the widget, it can bring up the full experience of the skill. And if the skill doesn't choose to provide APL, you're still on the home screen. And something starts speaking or sounding, like we have a widget, the fart button. Right. I want to mention that if you tap on it, you will get your sound. But actually, what happens behind the scenes, technically, it opens the skill, right, and it plays back a sound.
Got it.
Very cool.
And speaking of widgets, I'm trying hard to squint at the Echo Show in Jeff's background and wondering what are those 5 widgets that Jeff has, and do you use those?
Activated.
So I have the recipe of the day. I have smart home favorites, which just shows me like it's an easy toggle for smart home. I have weather. I have the sticky note one, and I have my calendar. And so, as you can see on there, I have an appointment with a dermatologist a little later this afternoon. Very exciting. So, yeah, good stuff.
Well, I can't see the text that clearly, which might be an okay thing. We won't necessarily have to see everybody's calendar, but it's
right.
Cool
That's mostly by design. It's far enough away, not really in focus.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess we'll just jump on to like a couple of other questions. So there was this question. We introduced the concept of data store, which is like an on-device data store specifically that skills can access. And this is slightly new terminology to a lot of skill developers because earlier, most of the times your skill would have access to data that would be in your skill backend, like in a database or in a data store of sorts. But all of that was in the cloud. But with widgets, we sort of launching this on-device data store. And there were a lot of questions around it, but one of the biggest questions was, is that can a user erase or otherwise mess up the data in their device? And this is speaking from a customer's perspective. And I believe, and Kai, correct me if I'm wrong, but I guess the way this would work is if you factory reset your device, that is one way how a user would mess up the data in their device. Apart from that, as a developer, you do have certain commands like the remove command, the clear command. I believe is the remove command. I do not know the exact name for this, but there is a put object, remove object command, which would remove the data from data store for you as a developer. So if you wanted to clear out some of those things, you could definitely do that. But on the customer end of things, they would have to factory reset their device to kind of like just clear out, which would then just clear all the data store, right? Not only specifically to your skill, but it would just remove all the data store as well.
I'm going to put my customer hat on for a second. Is there any concern with that? What if I, as a user, want to clear out what a skill has remembered about me locally on my device?
Good question.
I think about devices I have that I just want to clear the cache or clear the cookies from a browser or delete some data that I generated. Does a customer today have a way, like if I go through the menus on my Echo Show, is there any option for me to go in and say, get rid of these without just factory resetting my device?
That's a good question. I don't believe we do have a feature like that within the settings page at an overall Uber level, right? Because every skill will have its own partition. Yeah. And this would mean, and maybe this is a good, feature request that I can take it back to my team, and our team can look into this. In the absence of that, and if you as a skill developer want to provide that feature, you could always use these remove and clear commands that we were talking about, which is within the skill experience. Someone can just tap on it, and then you just send a post request with this clear command, and then it just removes all the data on data store.
Can I ask another follow-up to that?
Sure.
I know that I have a lot of problem with my PC with it filling up. With data store being local, is there any concern of widgets filling up my Echo Show and causing memory issues?
I've not seen that, to be honest. I believe today what we do is you cannot install more than 10 widgets on the device. So with 10 widgets, I believe the widget on-device data store, there are strict limitations around how much the skill can really access. And I believe, I do not have the number off top of my head. Kai, do you know remember the exact number off top of what skill could a skill could write?
I have a number, it's 1 megabyte, but it could also relate to the APL package, which does contain the APL document and data source. So
Right.
I might mix something up here, but definitely there is a limitation of what a widget can claim as data store storage on the device.
Okay.
So from a customer perspective, this is good news. It
Yeah.
actually addresses your concern. From a developer perspective, this is definitely something to keep in mind. if you are planning to store lots of data locally.
Yeah, I was going to say that these kinds of requirements and restrictions really demonstrate to developers the way that it's intended to be used, right? These are meant to be bite-sized, small chunks of data. Maybe it's something simple like a user's name or something basic, but not meant to be, like, for example, hold the entire state of an application for persistence sake, which can get rather big, especially as you include image data or audio files or things like that. So I think that's a great representation of the way that we think developers should use this. Now, will they try to match and like work through every nook and cranny and test the limits? Any good developer certainly will, right? They'll want to see what I can do, what I can't do. How can I move this content out of my skill, out of the cloud, locally to a user's machine so that I don't have to do it again and again. But it'll be very interesting to see how people approach this for sure.
Yeah. Do you want to take a couple more questions from the chat before we go back to the backlog? It looks like Brian Tarbox is asking, will there be a Python example code for a widget? I'm curious about that too. I'm also a Python developer.
Yeah, I'm unfortunately not a Python developer, but I can definitely go back to the team and try and figure out if we can release one. But at the end of the day, what you need to kind of, we do have a lot of other Python samples, and if this is blocking you, Brian, what you need to keep in mind as you kind of approach this is that you need to make sure that as a skill backend, you need to handle two events specifically, right? I mean, actually, you don't even need to handle any events because these events are totally optional. Like, so when you install a widget or when a widget gets updated and in your widget manifest, so the APL package remains the same. So that's something that you can take from the GitHub sample itself, right? And when you install a widget and when the widget gets updated, your skill receives two events, which is the data store package manager usages installed and package update requests. So these are like these two requests that will land into your skill. And what you would need to do within your Python backend is just make sure that you are handling these specific requests and just sending a proper response to that as you would normally do it. There isn't really that much specific thing in there, but I'll give it a shot, and maybe I cannot commit to how soon we can have this. But just from a backend perspective, that is from the skills backend perspective, you need to keep in mind that you just are handling the usages installed and package updated only if you want to. Again, it's not necessary that you need to, only if you have to. Like you would maybe use it for sending API requests to data store, right? Post requests to data store and update data stores. So those are the things that you might want to keep in mind as you go about this. And maybe we can bring up Kai's screen as well.
Yeah.
And Kai's got this really cool.
Yeah, just as a reminder, as Karthik was answering this question, it's not a lot that changes. So Karthik talked about these lifecycle events, the usages, installed and removed events, which are entirely optional, and you can opt out by setting the right flags in the widget manifest. But this is basically just another skill request handler, and we have Python code examples out there showing them. So basically, you just need to subscribe to another type of request with another name. And then there are those incoming APL user events and those outgoing APL directives. Again, this is optional just in case your widget chooses to be connected with your skill and interacts with your skill in the backend. And also for that, code examples in Python demonstrate the use of APL and how to go back and forth between your skill and your APL. In this case, it is a widget. And lastly, the data updates against the REST API. Again, optional if you choose to use data store. This is communicating with REST APIs, something that we haven't covered yet, at least in Python, in our own GitHub. But I'm sure there are REST API code references for Python out on the internet.
Thank you. It helps a lot for anybody who's approaching it from a different angle to see what the full architecture is.
Yeah, and I just just shared a simple link to our Alexa samples GitHub repository with a
I
list of
will
all the
post that.
Python repositories. So that could kind of like give a good, you know, intro into using Python with the skills kit, and then just replace it with these events that we were talking about.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Cool. And
I know Brian is a prolific Python developer, so it'll be nice to see if he can get some of this stuff up and rolling, because I know he tends to share what he's working on and share his philosophies on approaches and stuff. So that helps to kind of amplify the work that he's doing, which is great.
Python side of Alexa development. I'm with
Yes.
you. It's a fun language to use, so it's always good to see more support for other computer languages as well.
Hubuma1 also had a comment on Twitch talking about his Echo Show 15 and the widgets he's using, which are weather, smart home favorites, calendar. And then he's actually working on his own called Countdown to the Magic, which is part of his mouse guest skill, which is it's a skill for people that are visiting a Disney park. Craig, I need to let you know I'm leaving for Disney on June 7th.
Yay!
And I would really love to have this sooner than later. So if there's a way to get me access to that earlier, I'd love to be able to try it.
to get you on that widget, give it a shot. That's awesome. Yeah, I haven't been to Disney in a while, but if I go, I'll for sure be wanting to use those skills, and hopefully the widget will be ready by then.
Yeah. And also shout out to Craig, because he's responded with some really insightful product decisions for product features for widgets as well in the Slack channel. So super thankful for our Alexa champions like Craig, who just push the bar for the features that they want to see.
Yeah, I actually have an important question for you, Karthik. You are relatively new to living in the United States. I know you moved here earlier this year.
It's been 6 months now. Yeah.
When are you taking your family to Disney World?
Not yet, because we are still in the midst of it feels like the first year is all about just settling down, right? And my kid is like almost 2 years now, so we're just like having these first moments where we are just trying to get her into daycare. She still doesn't. She does like Mickey Mouse though, so maybe around one of these weekends or something like that, maybe we'll go around.
I have heard, and I don't want to spend too much time on Disney, but I've heard that 4 years old is the perfect time to take your child to Disney. There's enough magic that it's still like everything is mind-blowingly amazing. Once they're older, 8, 9, 10, they still love it, but it's not the same kind of like wonderment that they get when they're little.
Yeah,
it's the perfect age for the child, not for the parents.
Exactly.
Although a lot of the rides are scarier when you're that little. At least that was my remembrance of being very little at Disney. But yeah.
I mean, the things that my kid does, jumping on stools and stuff, jumping off from chairs and all.
Brave.
It's nothing yet. Pretty brave.
Sounds like she's ready.
Yeah.
Waiting for the Premier League season. Brian Tarbox has waiting for the Premier League season ending next week before I make changes to my skill. Yeah, that makes sense.
That seems pretty wise. If you have a website, any software really, that is temporally focused, right? There's specific times where it does and doesn't have a lot of users. I would wait to do my testing and changes until the season's off, for sure.
Yeah.
And Alan comment, ways to get you access, insert comment about beta testing here. That's a great question. Will there potentially be a beta testing services for widgets? Maybe.
So from what I recollect, when you use the beta testing service that we currently have, if you use that, the widgets get enabled on. So you would use it just like a skill.
So if a skill has beta testing enabled, which
and
beta
it has
testing,
widget.
yes, then we can enable the widget with that beta as well. That's really great.
Yep, you can. Yeah.
Do we want to dig back into that backlog of questions? We're at like 30 minutes and we had several questions already.
Sure. I think we can jump into the other question that we had. One of the questions that came in was, is account linking from a skill shared to the widget? And I guess what someone's asking here, the person who asked this question is trying to understand if you have a widget and then you have a skill where you have done the entire account linking process, would there be a way to kind of like share that with this widget? And I'm just going to hand it over to Kai to answer that.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. Not quite easy to answer. If I can get back my screen, so to show that
Yep.
illustration makes things so much easier. Thank you.
I get that.
So first things first, no, there is no direct access to anything account linking related information on the skill side. So actually, this is information stored on the cloud side, right? And the Alexa Skills Kit domain. And your widget operates locally on the device. So the only instance that gets access or to the most current information regarding the account linking is your skill, the skill endpoint that you can see on the lower left. So everything that goes in the direction of your skill endpoint, those lifecycle events, as well as the APL events, they will contain the access token as you know it, since everything hitting your skill is a regular Alexa skill request, and those have the access token. So your skill actually needs to feed back that information to the widget for the widget to pick it up and act accordingly, like displaying personalized information like your next upcoming appointment, if this is what your widget does. And then, of course, there is the challenge of keeping things in sync. So a user might be logged in and the account is linked with your skill at a certain point in time when the widget first comes up. But then the user disconnects or the token expires, whatever it is. This is information that your skill still needs to hand back to the widget. And it can either do that proactively by using the data store REST API to keep things in sync with the widget, or to let the widget periodically interact with the skill endpoint, let's say using a tick handler, and then retrieve the latest information regarding the account linking. So that's the information that I have.
Got it.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
Well, do we want to jump into the next question? Because this one is super meaty, and I'm curious about it too. I'll go ahead and read it off because I can see it. What are the best practices for allowing a widget to be configured so that users can install multiple the same widget with different configurations? Are there any best practices for configuring widgets right now?
So one of the things is I'm pretty sure most of the folks here might be aware of that the best practices that we have for APL, which Kai wrote, and it's available today in the tech documentation today. We've not yet released a form of best practices guide for widgets yet, because we've just gone GA with it. We want to give it some time before we come up with some of these best practices. Having said that, for a widget, here are a couple of things to keep in mind as you kind of install a widget, because we are talking generally about best practices. So let me just dive deep into a couple of these things. So one is that every widget that you install, so for example, you could have like multiple instances of the same widget on the same device itself. So if you have a widget, and users can install two of those same widgets on the same device as well, right? And they could also have the same widget on across multiple devices as well, right? Like I could have one in the Echo Show here, and then the Echo Show in the bedroom. There could be multiple widgets there. One thing to keep in mind as you envision your customers using multiple widgets is to keep track of its instance ID. So every widget install will have something unique called as instance ID. And you would typically get this by when you in your widget manifest, there is a property called as install state. You need to keep it to inform. And if you keep it inform, your skill receives a backend event, which is like usage is installed. And in there, you would get this instance ID that you can keep a track of to say that, hey, this user has these instance IDs installed, right? So this is one way to kind of like keep a track of the different instances that a certain user has. Now, diving deep into the other part of this, which is how do you kind of go about with configurations? We do not have a best practice yet, but what we've seen some of our developers do is there are a lot of things that you could do. One is that you could perhaps have a pager of sorts, and you could just scroll through the pager, and the last page could be settings, Mark Tucker's skill, pixel artist. has this pager of sorts where you could kind of like scroll to the last page and you could choose the color, from the brush, and then you can come back. And so that's one way you could kind of introduce settings for your customers. So that is one way that you can have configuration options. There's also, you could have like a settings menu within the entire page, within the entire widgets as well. And clicking on settings would kind of bring an overlay, and on that overlay, you would have your settings. That's one acceptable way to do it as well. Or additionally, what you could also do is if you tap on the widget, the last time we spoke about interaction modes. So when you do a send event, we have something called as interaction mode. We have inline event and we have the standard event. What the inline event does is it keeps everything inline, and what the standard does is it launches the skill. So maybe there could be a feature where you click on settings and it launches your skill, but a specific screen within your skill. And one way you may want to try this out is, I think we have this sticky notes experience widget. And if you go to sticky notes and you try to tap to add a sticky note, it will launch the full multimodal experience. And then you can change whatever you want to change on the multimodal experience, where you have your edit text and whatnot, and you change all of those things. And then you press on enter, and then the widget gets updated through data store updates or, inline responses. So those are like 2 or 3 ways that we could kind of really propagate customer settings, offer configuration options. But in all of these, just make sure that you have these instance IDs, so you know that which instance. So for which instance ID is the change actually being driven for. So that's one thing to keep in mind as you build it.
I'd like to add to that you do not necessarily need to store instance IDs, only if you want to store that configuration on the cloud side. So you can also store it locally on the device in the data store. And in that case, the widget takes care of persisting the configuration data and reading from it locally on the device. I mean,
that's one way to do that. Yep.
Yeah, but long story short, no, there are not best practices. Karthik introduced you to at least 3 options that you could use to solve this problem from a UX perspective. But no, we haven't concluded on what works best. And honestly, it depends on the use case. If there are lots of things to configure, you might need the full screen, then enter your skill and do it there. Otherwise, if it's only 1 or 2 things that you want to set up, maybe you do it inline inside the widget.
Prisoner 4044 suggests, last time I asked, there was a lot of confusion, but there was one comment by Amazon Alexa, which could have probably been any of us. If you long press on a widget, it's expected that the configuration screen will come up. Is that one of the ideas that's been?
Yeah, without divulging more into that, I don't think today 3P developers have access to this.
Okay.
So this is not something that we can do at this moment. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Thanks for clearing that up. So they're still working on what the right way to do configuration is, but the sliding through is one way of doing it, for example.
Exactly. And a lot of our skills already do it. A lot of Amazon's experiences do it as well. Like the sticky notes, you tap on it, it opens the full screen experience. So that's one of the most prevalent way to do it. But as we've seen in the case of our developer community, folks just go ahead and blow our minds with the creativity that they bring in. So it's not that you have to follow what Amazon is doing. As long as it's within the certification requirements, I don't believe there's anything gating how you want to take away these configuration options, implement these configuration options.
I'll tell you, I haven't installed sticky notes. I feel like I would just cover my Echo in sticky notes, although my to-do list keeps getting longer and longer and longer. I should really take something off.
Yeah.
My to-do list is currently insane, and it just seems like it just goes from crazy to insane, and it lives in those 2 worlds. But there's never a time where I'm like, oh look, I have nothing to do.
That's not the to-do list is clear. Imagine. Yeah. Well, we got a holiday Monday coming up, so maybe I'll do that tidy up to-do list element that I left for myself last week before I left for Seattle.
Yeah.
So Prisoner has another question. Before I get to that, though, I wanted to, because I don't know the answer to that one. In fact, somebody asked me last week why we hadn't given them some heads up on the new devices that were launched last week. Now, you guys may have been a little more plugged in, but I will tell you, when I saw the announcement, I was like, oh, cool, we have new devices. Oh, wait, why didn't I know we had new devices launching? Like, somehow I had completely missed that. Did you guys know we had all these new devices coming out last week?
Yeah, and as usual, we cannot speak about some of these things until they are releasing. Kai and I, we both had the opportunity to work on some of these devices and continue to work on these devices as we launch them. Yeah.
Cool. And
so as a,
go ahead.
I mean, I just imagine, no. I just guess that maybe the reason why we didn't have a heads up for developers this time, there are really no relevant changes from a developer perspective.
Yeah.
Like we had with Echo Show 15, larger screen, and then portrait mode, or the Echo Show 10 rotating. So this is when developers actually need to pick up a new, or could pick up a new opportunity and prepare their experiences. With this new devices, I don't see, at least from an APL developer perspective, there are lots of new things. Yeah, but there are just the rounded corners. Maybe you prepare your content not to show up on the the few pixels that are not safe anymore to store or display information. But other than that, no new viewport profiles whatsoever.
Got it. So when Prisoner asks if the new Echo Show 5s will support widgets, we should expect that the devices will behave as they have in the past, which is Echo Show 5 devices do not support widgets.
Yes. As of now, we do not support widgets. Yeah, that's all we can say at this moment.
Okay. No, that's great. I think we have to give clear, concise answers, even if they're not what people necessarily want to hear. And I think any answer that we ever give on a show like this is as of today, right? As of right now, that is the truth. That doesn't mean that it couldn't change or may not change in the future. But we can only give the answer as of today, for sure.
Yeah, if you're watching this in the YouTube archive and it's several months from now and we changed our mind, just know that today it's May and that's our answer. But right.
Yeah, there were a couple of questions around. I think Craig had also asked for whether we would support widgets on the Fire tablets when they go into the hub mode, and like all of these feedback that we keep getting from developers, we get it back to our product team. And as of today, we do not have any other comments on that, but hopefully in the future.
Yeah, and Brian Tarbox also asked another hardware question, which is, with regard to those new devices, he noticed that the new Echo Buds that were announced no longer have noise cancellation, where previous editions did. He wants to know if we'll still be able to buy Echo Buds with noise cancellation. You are almost certainly asking the wrong four people. I don't think that we have any insight into that at all. But I will tell you, the Echo Buds 2, which is the version that I use as a daily driver for taking a walk outside or on the airplane or wherever I happen to be. Those are some of the finest, and I'm tech agnostic when it comes to hardware. Those are some of the best headphones I've ever used. And having Alexa built into them is certainly a nice perk, but I think I would like them even if they didn't have that. So I'll be interested to see what the new ones look like and sound like, for sure.
Cool. Very cool.
I would love to spin up another conversation. We have about 15 minutes left. You guys have had an opportunity to play with widgets somewhat extensively, I would say, at this point, and you've probably had ideas pop into your head about how you could use the tech or ways that you could approach a problem. And one of the questions that came out of the Tech Talk last week was, is there a way to monetize my widgets? Now, obviously, there are lots of monetization options that happen inside skills, and we've talked at length about those. But is there anything that stood out to you as an interesting way, paradigm, focus, I don't know what the right word is, for thinking about how I could monetize having a widget on my screen? Maybe it's product recommendations or something like that, but I'm wondering if you guys have any more clever, novel ideas for how something like that might go down.
Yeah, maybe I can start with some of it. So yes, you can use to answer the specific question. Can you use ISP with with a widget? Yes, you can use that. And as opposed to what you could use for, the possibilities are endless. Just as opposed to what I believe it's the Big Sky skill. The Big Sky widget has a premium experience where I guess the first widget is free, but if you wanted a widget I do not recollect now, but if you wanted the widget to kind of like display more information, or if you wanted to install another widget for some other location, I guess there was a premium for utilizing that. So that's one way how some developers are handling it, I believe. Those are I believe that's one or two experiences that I've seen so far where maybe you offer one widget for free, and maybe like, and it entirely depends on your use case, right? Like if your use case supports like a weather widget, where you may want to have, or maybe you want to you work across multiple time zones, and maybe you want two different widgets for two different clocks, right? And maybe for one clock you can charge something, and for the other one would be free, the initial one would be free, and customers could have that. That's one way to propagate that. Or even within the experience itself, the I believe one of the things that we had also called out in the tech talk was that yes, you can add ISP, but just like skills, I don't think a lot has changed in that perspective. That there should be some base content which is free, right? There is something that should be free, because it should not be the case that you install the widget and then you cannot access anything, and it's like you have to pay $9 or whatever amount to kind of like unlock functionality. There should be a set of base functionality for sure, and within the widgets, then the extra functionality should be guarded behind an ISP paywall. Different instances, and even within the same instance, you could have like, for example, if it's a game with specific turns, like maybe you have a tic-tac-toe game widget built and you're playing around with it, and maybe if you want some more lives or something like that, for that you can buy some tokens and use it. So yeah, that's games is one of the primary driver for ISPs, right? So you can have a game skill, which and you can buy some tokens and propagate the widget with these tokens, and use those tokens to use within the widget itself. So that's one way you could totally do that. Yeah, again, I can keep brainstorming about this all day.
Right.
Depends on the use case. And Kai, you may have some more ideas around this if you had.
No, you brought up great ideas. I just want to underline that, yes, there is an expectation that widgets provide an experience that is for free and not just paid. So whatever you put out as features, make sure they're not entirely gated behind the paywall. And you can still provide greater value when users are paying. My stock ticker example from last time. If you have a stock ticker widget, maybe you increase the update interval from 10 minutes to 1 minute, or even 10-second basis. I don't know. This for sure might have a cost impact on your side, on your AWS bill. So you may want to make sure that this is being charged for.
Reasonable.
Always good to be cautious. I want to tell a quick story about when I spent a lot of time in the mobile app world. This was way before I joined Amazon. And I discovered that there was an app. It was first published in the Apple App Store. It was called I Am Rich. Do you guys remember this skill? Or this
Yeah.
So the whole purpose of the app was that if you had it on your phone, you had paid the $999, which was the maximum amount of money you could charge for an app in the store.
Okay, I kind of remember this.
And so if you had that app on your phone, it was a clear indication to anyone that looked at your phone that you were wealthy, or at least willing to spend the $1,000 that was required to get the app. You guys brought some interesting points. I'm not recommending that anyone build this, but I am. Would that be against the rules? If I built a skill that had a basic amount of functionality that told me about how wealthy I am, it just gave me a bunch of, it's not words of affirmation, it's words of wealth or something, like, hey dude, you're totally loaded, or whatever it is. And I had you pay whatever the maximum amount was for an ISP, which then enabled a widget to be turned on that just showed like a picture of a diamond or something that indicates my wealth. Am I breaking any rules there?
I recall there was a policy around that. I'm not for sure.
Okay.
But I recall when I read that policy, I thought about the exact app.
It
was
it seems
okay, good that we took care of this.
On any platform where
might
you
be wrong,
can
though.
install something and you can charge money for things, that kind of skill is going to appear, right?
Yeah.
just to test the limits. I mean, honestly, for a developer like that, if you sell one of them, you won. Like that's all it takes.
One person chips in, then you did it.
Yep.
You got your user.
I have a more inspiring story. Do you know that website? And I think it was in the late 90s where someone just wanted to become a millionaire. So he created a website to sell ad space. And then he created 1 million
pixels. Yeah.
Yeah,
then,
I remember that.
Yeah. And he sold all 1 million pixels and he became a millionaire. That was inspiring.
1 pixel at a time.
Yeah. Absolutely an amazing idea, for sure.
That's clever.
Witters has already started coding that I am rich skill. So
there we go. Start coding that I am rich widget.
Certification team, heads up. It's coming soon.
Can widgets have skins? Can I do a skin on a widget and charge for that? Can I do a skin on a widget and charge for that?
Sorry, what was that?
A skin. Do you remember skins? Like you would reskin your audio player to have a different look and feel, but it would be the same functionality?
I would say yes. I mean, it's a level of personalization that you could offer, and you could also monetize.
Cool.
Customize the, maybe I want like a lavender mode or something, change the colors and stuff on my widget.
The only thing I know there was a policy for that as well, that you need to call out that a purchase can only be consumed on a device with a display. Like we have for APL only features that you would monetize. You need to call that out in the purchase prompt.
Yeah, because if you're monetizing something that just changes the look and feel of the widget, like that would be a bonus effect, but obviously it would only work if you had a screen display.
And worth another call out. Yeah, probably.
Right. Makes sense.
All right, there was one more question that came in from Brian Tarbox, and I don't think we have an answer for this, but I want to ask it anyway, and we can have a discussion about maybe what we think at a minimum. He goes, what are the plans, knowing that you can't answer questions like that, for organizing the widget gallery when there are dozens or hundreds of widgets available? Today, you can see how as it grows, it will become unmanageable. So has there been any thought about how we're going to approach that or address it?
It would be great, right?
Yeah, it's a great problem to have for Amazon, for sure.
So, yeah, like I said, we cannot comment, but certainly there are some obvious things that should be worked on. And I would be surprised if teams do not share developer opinions.
Yeah. Got it. We definitely saw a lot of comments in the Slack about this, about like...
This definitely has to be on someone's radar. But as far as what the solution is actually going to be, I don't think anyone has an answer, at least not on this show.
And I believe also on a minimum, one of the reasons why developers are also asking for this is, as you kind of, as Craig was mentioning in his feedback the other day, if you are someone who's trying to play around with widgets, and you've got like 3 or 4 widgets, just test widgets, all of a sudden your widget gallery gets populated with these widgets. So at a bare minimum, you would want these to be in a different tab of sorts or something like that, where, you're not accessing this immediately, or they are not flooding at least your main gallery, right?
Right.
Makes sense. All right, well, we only have a couple of minutes left. Are there any other parting thoughts or resources or ideas that you'd like to leave our audience with about Alexa widgets before we sign off?
I guess, no, I had written down the link here as well, in case someone wanted to look at it. But I guess widgets, the way we look at widgets is up until now, you had skills where, as a skill developer, you would have to, get customers to say the invocation name or try to, invoke something so that they would come back to your skill. And widgets present this option to retain some of those users, retain some of those customers by having a persistent presence on your Echo Show devices. So they are a really good way to drive persistent usage as well, right? So persistent presence, like as you can see, Jeff, I keep looking at your Echo Show device and I see those 5 widgets there, and those have been visible to me all the time. So, it's something that's always on the back of my mind. So if you create a really compelling widget, customers install it and it becomes part of their daily workflow, it feeds into the cycle of them having to invoke your skill, and then leads to, as you kind of have more of this retention, you will garner more opportunities for revenue as well, right? So that's one way to look at widgets, and I'm excited to see there are a few widgets already in the widget gallery, so go ahead and check all of them out. But I'm excited to see what the developer community innovates with these widgets and pushes the bar on this and keeps asking us for more features so that we keep delivering our promises to developers.
Yeah. I'm going to swap out the link at the bottom. So if you guys want to know more about widgets, you can go to the link at the bottom, which is alexa.design/widgets, and it'll take you to our tech docs, which talk all about widgets. But we also have this other link, which is widgets_tech talk. If you guys didn't get an opportunity to watch this live when it happened last week, you can go there and you can watch the tech talk that Karthik and Kai gave last week, and I highly recommend it. They really cover it all. So, Kai, any parting thoughts before we sign off?
I can only re-emphasize what Karthik already said. I think widgets is a great opportunity for developers. And as we called out in the blog post, it actually was headlined, building a widget in 50 minutes. We stopped the clock. It really is that simple. So if you get started in the authoring tool and the developer console, and you're opting out of those lifecycle events, there is not even a need to touch your skill code. So separately, you are publishing a widget and just let this widget enter your skill. And then you have a whole new, potentially a whole new audience that discovers your skill through your widget.
That's
Perfect.
awesome. We're also seeing in the chat, 5K opens the skill from widgets per week from 80K installed widgets. That's really good numbers. Congratulations. It sounds like it's really working out for you.
Yeah, that's good.
Well, thank you for being on the show today. I feel like we had a great discussion, learned a lot. Yeah, that link to the tech talk, it'll link you to a thing that says register. I looked at it earlier, but if you just click through, it'll take you right to the talk. So you don't actually have to pre-register. It just takes you to the VOD. So
Cool.
Excellent.
thank you for being on the show today.
Yep. Thanks,
And
everyone.
we will see everybody out there next week for another edition of Office Hours.
Yep. Thanks for being here, everybody. We'll see you next week.
Bye-bye.
Bye.